going to ask Rosalie to unmute so that she can join us for a chat about her experiences post-layoff, and if she could give us some advice that could really be helpful to you all. I know she is going to. She had so many gems when we spoke. So Rosalie, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Jasmine. I'm so excited. And I know when we first chatted, I kept sending you DM messages after saying like, oh, I thought of this and I thought of this. And like, also like, it was definitely, things kept coming. There's just honestly so many things to think about when you get laid off, whether you expect it or whether you don't expect it. I ended up being at a big corporate company, moving to a startup because I felt like I wanted to find that community. And I really searched for a company that I thought, was all about the people, was all about the mission and purpose. And I was like, this is going to be where I am for the next several years, if not more. And then fast forward a year later with the economic environment and with restructuring, I found myself laid off. And so like Jasmine mentioned earlier, one of the biggest things that hit me was I was very loyal to that company and to where it was going and how it was growing, that I met a ton of people. I probably met half the company in the year that I was there in one-on-one conversations and in other networking kind of group settings. And so when I found myself laid off, it was just a complete shock. And so processing those emotions was definitely valid. There was a lot of, shock, frustration, anger, a little bit like, okay, what do I do now? Like, this is where I thought I was going to be. And just knowing that all those feelings are okay and completely okay to just take that time to process. And then the other thing, since I knew it wasn't just like, we're laying off one person, it was a group of us. It was about like, okay, what do I think about them? And in my specific instance, there were two, it was my entire team that was let go. So it was myself plus two of my direct reports. And so I immediately thought I need to support them and help them through it and try to find them a new role because I knew that, they were going to be seeking their next role pretty soon. And I had another friend who I had referred in who I was like, I'm so sorry I referred you in and now you find yourself laid off a year later. And so I reached out to them. We also knew who the others were who were laid off. So I reached out as well. And it was just so helpful to talk through that. And did we expect it? Did we not? And kind of just dissect it together and commiserate together a little bit and then just find support. And so even now, it's been probably coming up on a year since I was laid off, and I still keep in touch with a few of them. So some of them have still trickled through to become real friends, and we have brunch, every once in a while, or go walk through the park. I'm in Manhattan, so I'm next to Central Park, which is nice. So, but yeah, that's a little bit about kind of how it happened, and I'll stop there.
And so I've already got a few individuals in the chat saying, really resonating with your story, saying that it happened very similarly to as it did to you, with them, whole teams potentially being let go, not just individual layoff. And that's something that we're seeing and experiencing now. So I would love to know, have you experienced a mass layoff at your company? If you have experienced a mass layoff at your company, please drop a 1 in the chat so we can get a little bit of an understanding of who has had that experience. And if there's anyone who has, oh yeah, we have a few people who've had that experience. So if you have had that experience of a mass layoff and are really looking for that support, that community, we've been dropping LinkedIn profiles in the chat. Connect with each other. As you just heard Rosalie say, this impacted her emotional well-being. It was something that she felt isolated around, even though her team got let go simultaneously. She had to make that effort to make those connections and feel that connection again. And so it's so important that we do not isolate after this moment. And I am a Cancer, and in case you don't know, I love going into my crabby shell when anything bad happens, but it's so incredibly important that we break out of that and we really look for individuals who have gone through these experiences and who can help us navigate the journey, even if it is to validate one another and support one another around that emotional processing. Having someone say, yes, I know what you're going through is powerful. Yes, Rosalie, go for it.
I was going to say, and one thing I don't know if we had spoken about before was I really leaned on people who were going through that experience because I knew we could support and commiserate together. I actually didn't tell my family for probably months, like because they live in California and I'm in New York. I did not tell my family. I did self-isolate from that perspective, but only because I felt like that was right for me, to lean on people who knew what I was going through. I almost didn't want that extra emotional baggage of telling them and them having to feel bad for me or support, or like not even support me, but I didn't want them to feel the burden that I was feeling. I rather like share that burden with people who were experiencing the same thing. So I guess just to note that you can process it the way you want to process it. You can tell people who you think might be helpful. You aren't required to tell everybody, I've been laid off, like, let's talk about it. So process
Yeah,
it.
absolutely. I love that addition that, it's almost kind of like talk to people who are going to be that support system for you and who you feel good about talking about the situation with. And so I would love your thoughts on this, Rosalie, because we do have Brett, I believe it was. I'm going back. So Brett mentioned, oh no, yes, Brett mentioned that she has a unique situation in which she was provided a layoff notice, but she's actually continuing to work with her employer. So she is working with her employer right now, and she's dealing with a lot of different feelings around still being with that employer, but technically being laid off. So do you have any thoughts about how someone could maybe manage something like that? That's a very unique situation.
Yes, definitely. I mean, so I don't know how long you have the notice for, if it's just a couple weeks, a month or 2 or 3. I would say that obviously your expectation and your emotion is going to shift, and you're going to not give, 110% as you may have done before. If you have a really hard work ethic, like I want to do my best, I would do the minimum that you need to do. And just in terms of the bitterness, I would say I'm going to do, I'm exchanging my time for money, and it's a transaction that I'm doing this job, and kind of start to, even if it's little by little, like disassociate those feelings of this was my work, this is my community and my family potentially, and kind of go about it that way. And I feel like it will get easier, and it's a job. Because I know, in Jasmine, you talk a lot about that too. It's like, you should not be 100% loyal to your company. You should be 100% loyal to yourself. So do what you need to do while you're in that situation. And honestly, if it gets to the point where you don't want to stay that full notice, if you have the opportunity to leave sooner and that's better for yourself, then do that as well.
Yeah, I think you bring up such a great point, Rosalie. I love to think about everything as a perspective. So you received notice, and there's some bitterness, some feelings because you're still there. But what does still being there and generating income provide you in terms of stability, and also in terms of runway, to give you a little bit more time to find something else while still having some income coming through? So sometimes those perspective changes in which we can see some silver lining in the situation that we are in doesn't mean that it jumps us to, yeah, this is amazing, but it can help with getting a little bit more to the neutral state. So instead of feeling bitter and angry, which are very heavy negative emotions, you start to feel a little bit more neutral about the situation. So I would say perspective shift. And Rosalie, what I heard you talk about too is almost kind of like boundary setting. So making sure that you have boundaries around yourself and your time and what you are dedicating to this company, so that you're not dedicating more to an organization that you are transitioning out of. And Rosalie, the other thing that you mentioned is loyalty to self, which, yes, is something that I love to talk about. Loyalty to self. So when it comes to a point where you feel like, I can't do this anymore, can you be the one to back away if it's not working for you anymore? I love that. So Rosalie, we have another question for you. You mentioned loyalty, and that has been the biggest challenge for us. In the future, how can we overcome this when we think about our next move? So when you think about, Rosalie, because you started your own business, and I want you to definitely talk about how the layoff has opened you up to possibility, especially that possibility, because I love it. But I would love to know what tools or resources helped you feel like, I'm putting myself first, right? Because that's truly the loyalty factor. It's like, I'm being loyal to me. So were there any mindset shifts you had, anything that you did that made you say, you know what, loyalty to self, loyalty to me, I'm going to go and I'm going to do this amazing thing for myself?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think throughout your career, people tell you advocate for yourself. It's a little bit harder when you're early on in your career because there is a hierarchy, there are different levels. You don't know how exactly to advocate for yourself, but as you move up, you start advocating more and more. And I always say, you have to ask, and they should tell you no, you shouldn't tell yourself no. And so then you move up, you start realizing, okay, I'm loyal to this company. You start also seeing different values in the company, and it's like, does it make sense? Like, do our values align? And sometimes you do find yourself where you're like, okay, my values do not align, but I'm going to stay loyal because, I'm here, there's benefits. You do your pros and cons list, there's more pros. And then I reached a point where at my one company, my values didn't align anymore. And there was definitely a disconnect, and it was affecting me like overall. So then I said, okay, I want to be loyal to a company, but I want to be loyal to a company that cares about its people, its mission, and everything. And I searched long and hard for the next company that I found. And I was like, I'm going to be loyal to them. And then, like I mentioned, fast forward a year, I'm being laid off when it was all about the people and everything. And so it was almost like that final straw that was like, okay, the only person who's going to truly care about yourself is yourself. And the only company that's going to truly care about you 100% and always be there for you is if you have your own company. So that's where I kind of was the final straw that I was like, okay, I'm going to start my own company. And I always knew I would end up in some type of consulting, maybe freelance later in my career. I didn't know exactly when, but that was almost like my final push that I was like, okay, I want to create a company where I'm caring about myself. I'm creating the values. I'm setting the tone. And that ended up being what launched me into entrepreneurship. So for those who stay in corporate or, work for other companies and that's what works for them, it's almost like a constant reminder of don't be loyal to yourself. Like, don't be loyal to the company 100%. Like, do what you need to do. Like, excel where you want to excel because you choose to do it, because it's helping you in your experience and for the future. So always constantly remind yourself, because especially those that are very hardworking, and you end up finding yourself again in that loop of like, oh shoot, I'm doing too much. And I always found myself in that. So it's even more now, like every day, remind yourself to be loyal to yourself, advocate for yourself, and don't do too much unless you're working for yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. And I love how it's like that loyalty to self. I'm going to focus on me. Even when I gave everything that I wanted to this organization, this still happened to me. And we're not advocating that everybody just go ahead and start businesses. That's not necessarily what might feel good to you at this moment. But really what this conversation is about is, again, perspective shift. Can you see this as an opportunity for you to explore, even if it is a new job, a new company, the ones that work for you? And putting yourself first, because loyalty to self can also be going into a job search and finding a new opportunity, but one that works for you. And one of the questions that did come in is, how do you find a company where this isn't going to happen again? Right? And there is no magical company where this may not happen again. But Rosalie, I'd love to know your thoughts on this. I was really thinking about us, again, taking the power back during this process and utilizing networking and interviewing to really ask thoughtful questions around the financial health, security, and also past layoff situations or even future expectations for layoffs at each company. And us feeling confident enough to ask those questions, like when you go on an interview next, asking, have you been impacted by the layoffs? How did you handle it? And do you see your company growing in the future? And if so, what does growth look like for your organization and company? So do you have any thoughts, being that this has occurred to you? If you were to step in the job search tomorrow, what are some things you would look out for in terms of a company to try to mitigate this risk of this happening to you again?
Yeah. So when I initially got laid off, I was, I would say, passively looking, even though I wanted to really figure out if I wanted to go toward entrepreneurship 100%. And so I did have conversations, and I told myself, I'm going to ask those candid questions, because you need to know who you're working for and kind of what their thought process is. So I did ask, there's been a lot of layoffs, a lot of companies have been impacted. Like, have you had any, and what was your thought process behind it? Were you involved? Were there culture shifts that you saw? And just to see what their response was. And it's a good question to ask the HR person, since usually you have somebody in talent that you're speaking with. And I think it shows that you're thinking about it and you want to know what the company is. I think it's a very valid question to ask. And if they are put off by it for some reason, then it's probably not the right company. It's almost like there's your answer. If they say, yeah, it happens and we just have to do it. Like, you want to see that there is some thought process behind it and that they are thinking about it and that it's not just cutting people when they feel like it because they want to get more profit. So definitely ask questions, feel empowered to ask questions. It's as much an interview for them as it is for you. And so ask anything about culture, about layoffs. Yeah, I would say those are probably the two biggest ones.
Yeah, I love the questions about like just going straight up, like, have you been affected by the layoffs, which I totally agree with you, Rosalie, there. And financial health. So asking about the financial health of the company. You can also do Google alerts if you're looking to join a big company, or if that's something that if you're interviewing for a big company, do a Google alert on the company and start doing some Google research as well. Kind of like this mindset of, if I were going to invest in this company, would I invest in them? Do they seem financially healthy? Do they seem savvy? Do they have the core values that I'm looking for? Because when you are joining a company, it's almost like you are an investor, but it's an investor of your time, your effort, and your work, which I think is even more invaluable than money is. So definitely do your research, look into the financial health of an organization. If it's a nonprofit, you can look at Charity Navigator. So Charity Navigator helps individuals look at the financial health of nonprofit organizations and where their money is coming from. So definitely look into and do a lot of research and ask questions. And Rosalie, you mentioned not feeling comfortable talking to your family about or some of your family about the layoff. And we have someone in the chat who also mentioned, that's my dog in the background who's having a crazy dream. Cody.
My dog is the same.
Okay, he was having the wildest dream. So someone else in the chat said that they didn't feel comfortable also telling family members, or that they feel pressure from family, around their layoff. So why didn't you tell certain family members about your layoff? And how do you think culturally that has an impact on, us having a 9-to-5 and having that stable job?
I think it goes, and my family is always fully supportive and everything, and there's nothing against them. It was just having that experience where they wouldn't know what I was going through, and they were going through their own things. So it was almost my way of protecting them a little bit and protecting myself in terms of letting me process it. It was also a very unique situation for me because I was on vacation. So I found out while I was surrounded by not only my immediate family, but extended family. And for those of us who go and travel back to our home countries, like sometimes you're like, oh, I have financial stability. You have more means. You're maybe paying for more lunches and dinners because it's a little bit cheaper. So my mom's side of the family is from Ecuador. And so it was almost like, I didn't want them to all of a sudden think like, oh, she has no job and now her money's gone or something. I was just like, I just, wanted to keep my identity, I guess, as it was for a little bit longer. And I think it was totally fine. Like, yeah, my mom did kind of say after, like, why didn't you tell me? How dare you not tell me? But I told her that's how I needed to process, and she's okay now. She still loves me at the end of the day. So it's a decision that you kind of consciously have to realize what's right for yourself.
Absolutely. And give yourself the space and time to process your way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love that. So let me ask you, what advice would you give to the individuals on the call? What's something that you wish maybe you would have known, or some advice that you would really love to share, a nugget of information that if someone were to get off the call right now, they would have that with them as a piece of information they can take to really start this next journey?
I could probably give other ones, but I always go back to you stay 100% loyal to yourself and remind yourself that on a daily basis. It's almost like a daily affirmation because it's easy to stray. And so it's hard to kind of keep that in mind. So it's almost like a daily affirmation. Like, I'm 100% loyal to myself. I'm going to make decisions that are the best for myself in that moment and at that time, depending what I'm going through. And and kind of almost like daily affirmation, but then every month or so, like check in with yourself and see, are you being too loyal to this company? Are you giving them what they need and what you need? Or is there like an imbalance that you need to kind of shift that perspective back?
Yeah, I love that. I love that loyalty to self. And tell us a little bit about your business that you started.
Yeah. So again, I mentioned that I wanted to get into entrepreneurship, and I didn't know at what point I would. I wanted to go into big companies. I was at a big four accounting firm, and then I went to a really large global prestige beauty company, and I wanted to really build my skill set. And I've been in internal audit for my career. So I help companies manage risk. I help them do audits. I help them figure out what's not working and how to get it to work. And also more of a compliance perspective too, of are they following the correct policies and procedures as well. And so it's all about managing risk and getting those strategies and the tactics. And so I then now, with everything that happens, found myself in a place where I wanted to work with companies that, wanted to make an impact, that wanted to create community. I wanted to kind of go back to my communities and help them build their businesses, because there is a huge entrepreneurship ecosystem that's almost like snowballing. I feel like even more so than before, and everyone is feeling empowered to do it, and I love it. And so I want to help take my knowledge and help them succeed. So it's really about helping them get their foundations all informed with a risk lens, and making sure that they're approaching and taking all their decisions with the right mindset of, this is the risk. Am I taking it? Am I not? Is that the right appetite? And just helping them, propel forward and become the powerhouses that they want to be, make the impact that they want to make. And so I'm enjoying the journey right now. It's really exciting. I see myself doing this for a long time. And yeah, so I'm excited to see where it takes me.
Awesome. I'm so excited to see where it takes you too. And we have a few individuals who have dropped comments, including Venice, who said that her job loss launched her into her book journey. And that's such an amazing journey to be going through, Venice. I'm super curious. So we have a few individuals on this call, including Rosalie, who has made her transition into entrepreneurship. And we also have Hadi, who was one of the individuals, or the individual interviewed during the course, who you heard went into speaking and really having a DEI consulting business. So is anybody on the call interested in starting a consulting firm, or starting a business, or leaving the corporate space completely post layoff? Drop a 1 in the chat if anyone is really interested in exploring that journey. I'm curious. Do we have any folks? Okay, yeah, Jesse. Oh, I love that for you, Jesse. Yeah, so that's okay. We have Abhishek. I hope that I said that okay. Then we have, I'm going to say this, Tembile. I hope that I said that okay. Is interested, but imposter syndrome is killing me. So do you have any advice for someone who might be interested in stepping off into the entrepreneurial space, but maybe facing those feelings of imposter syndrome and self-doubt, Rosalie?
I would say that it's coming from, now that I'm doing, risk consulting as an entrepreneur, it's a big risk assessment. So it's figuring out why do you want to do it? What would you
I love that. You're like, now that I'm doing risk-based work, you need to look at the risk.
A lot of what I'm honestly trying to do is, my ultimate vision is to empower everyone with a risk mindset, whether you are a business or an individual, because we all should make decisions from a risk-informed lens, no matter what our role is or what our title is or where we come from in the world. So for me, individuals, they do as many risk assessments as companies should do. So it's figuring out, what is your skill set? Is there something else that you want to learn before you launch into entrepreneurship? Financially, that's always a big factor. Like if especially if you have a family to support or other obligations. So look at your skill set, look at your finances, and then really probably take advantage of free workshops or free conversations with people to see what it's really like. Because, it's one thing to walk into a job and like, this is my title, this is what I'm doing, and these are my responsibilities, and do that. And then entrepreneurship is a whole other ball game. So like you mentioned earlier, Jasmine, it might not be for everybody. So really take the time to evaluate if it is for you. And in the meantime, continue to apply for jobs as well. I did that in the beginning because you never know what could come up. And yeah, so I would say those are probably the 3.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rosalie, for joining us and dropping all of your
Sure.
gems. And I am going to echo that. So if you are interested in exploring other types of opportunities, speaking, consulting, creating a business, I love how Rosalie started with risk. So assess what the risk is and what your needs are in terms of having the income to be able to support you as you grow your business. And then also think about, what are the skills that I have that are marketable? What are the experiences that I have that are marketable? And who are they marketable to? So when you are trying to grow and build a business, a consulting agency, a speaking engagement, or you're even looking for bridge opportunities, bridge jobs, as you are transitioning to more full-time employment, it is all about, who can I target and how can I